Do you have a few minutes?
I gotta make some changes in my life. Do you even realize what your life means?
Morning Cup of Joe, a Missouri S&T podcast using pop culture to destigmatize mental health.
Fake laugh, hiding real pain.
Do not self-destruct.
I didn't ask for this to happen.
Join us in using everyday examples to explain usable techniques to help improve your mental well-being.
Stay a while and listen.
Welcome back, minors. My name is Amber Johnston. I'm a counselor here in Student Wellbeing.
And my name is Tracy Kriegel, and I'm also a counselor here in Student Wellbeing. And it's time for your Morning Cup of Joe.
So, Tracy, you know how a few weeks ago we went to go see, as a department, we went all to go see the movie Inside Out?
Yes, and it was a really good movie. It was funny. I really enjoyed it.
It was really cute.
It was.
Well, after we left that movie, I started thinking about how the movie represented our emotions and our perceptions of the events that happen around us, and how it doesn't really paint any of the emotions as bad, but kind of paints them as having each of them a role in our life and how we see the world.
You know, given that the second movie was released recently, I think we want to make it clear that we're not going to be issuing spoilers today, right?
No spoilers.
No spoilers today.
None for the most recent movie.
Right. So we're going to focus on the first movie, and that there will be some minor spoilers about the first film. So
nothing that you wouldn't have gotten if you've seen a trailer for the film.
Right, exactly. So you can just be patient with us. So we're just going to give you a little bit here, just some dibbles and dabbles.
So the basic premise of Inside Out is that each person has a team of emotions, which are symbolized by cartoon characters, inside of their head that are hanging out in this basically control room. What's really cool is it's a really good visual allegory for how the limbic system works.
Yep. So we're going to talk a lot on here about the limbic system. But just to recap what the limbic system is, it's a system of several crucial parts in the brain that include the hypothalamus, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the limbic cortex. They take all things like our five senses and our thoughts and our memories from our cerebral cortex, and they translate it into our emotions, how we feel, and they prepare us for action, in some cases, inaction.
And Inside Out, this is represented as a giant video screen. So that's how it kind of represents our senses. So we see the video screen, and in front of that video screen is a control panel, which would be the limbic system. And behind the control panel, we have the 5 characters, which are each set to symbolize each of the five of the basic emotions.
Yeah, they used 5 of the 6 universal basic emotions according to psychology. So happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, and anger. And the 6th emotion, which is not used in this movie, is, surprise, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they used the 5 basic emotions for that. I always thought that was kind of cool. As the 5 emotions take in the stimuli, they see these things played out on the screen, and they hear the interactions with other people, or they'll see her having a memory or whatever. They then interpret those events and react accordingly.
And sometimes even memories or thoughts that Riley's having.
Yeah, even the memories that she has, things that she thinks about. And as you notice, each can have a slightly different interpretation of the same event. So they'll see the same event and they'll interpret it as having different meaning, or they'll take something differently from it. And they get to even arguing about it sometimes. And before one character or another, depending on the situation, depending on who feels that they're the dominant emotion that's quote, in control in that situation, takes over the control panel and dictates how Riley responds.
Mm-hmm. So now what they're seeing in the life of a young girl named Riley, and her dominant emotion is joy or happiness. meaning that happiness seems to have control most of the time, which means that it's the lens which she views the most of the time. And other people have other emotions that dominate the narrative. And so, I guess, for maybe some of our listeners who are listening out there, this probably sounds Greek for what I'm thinking, right? So let's do this, Amber.
Right.
So if I'm Joy and I'm seeing Riley, right? And I'm thinking like, she's happy about putting on her ice skates, and look at her. Look, she's looks so happy, and she's getting on the ice today, and she's going to get out there and she's going to play her best. These are the things that Joy might be saying. And anger might be going, oh, really? She's going to lose. She's not going to do it. He's getting angry. He's getting mad because somebody's going to just hit her or something of the such.
Yeah.
So they're you're fighting over that panel up there, and it's like that big screen playing, but the emotions. So is this sounding familiar to anybody? Right?
Well, and that's kind of how it goes when you think about it. Like, we do have, each of us has kind of the emotion that we display the most.
Right.
And so when you talk about Joy, you're talking about somebody that's generally optimistic. They're generally looking from the bright side of things. They think that the people around them are generally good and that good things will generally happen. And that's really where Riley starts the movie. Like, she's generally optimistic and happy. But that changes when they move. And when they move, now all of a sudden, you start to have some of those other emotions like fear and sadness start to have equal weight with Joy. So previously, Joy had been kind of the one who was calling the shots, like she was in charge. And it stopped being the case because Joy wasn't the primary emotion anymore.
Right. And we see that a lot of times in people's lives, when you can tell. So even though Joy says positive, you can really tell she doesn't want to give up that control. And instead she argues to keep looking at everything from her perspective.
Right.
Yeah.
And she has to learn that the other emotions aren't necessarily bad, because you can tell at the beginning of the movie, she really kind of looks at the other emotions as less than. And when you think about it, when we talk about emotions, we use a lot of that positive and negative language, but in reality, emotions aren't that way. They all serve a purpose. Like, disgust serves the purpose of protecting us from eating spoiled food or making sure we don't eat something that's going to make us sick. Fear keeps us safe. Anger is the emotion that allows us to protect ourselves from others that seek to do us harm. It's the one that doesn't let other people walk on us. All of these emotions have a place, and Joy really has to go through the process of figuring that out.
Right. And, when you're looking at that control panel inside her head, you think about, you also see her mother's head's control panel, you also see her father's head's control panel. The emotion here is for that leader is a little bit different in all of their heads. So I think it's interesting how we're seeing, in the movie, how it's portrayed of what's happening in her head, what's happening in mom's head, what's happening in dad's head. Everybody's doing something different. It's how all of us are. There's different emotions that are at play, and it's like we're all walking around having different emotions, saying different things to us, which is so real.
Well, and we each have our own, pretty much default, I guess you would say.
Yeah.
And for her mother's head, her mother's default was sadness. So she primarily came at everything from a place of sadness. And her dad's default was anger. So when you looked at who was sitting at the center of the control panel in each of their heads, it was, in her dad's head it was anger, and her mom's head it was sadness. That really deeply affects how they responded to situations, because her mom, when you noticed the conversations happening in her mom's head, everything was calmer and was more sad and more resigned, and her dad's was more angry and volatile. It was very interesting. Yeah.
Sure. So tell me how it all fits together a little bit more.
Well, let's say our primary emotion is fear or sadness. How we interpret events is going to be skewed towards that emotion. For example, if I'm checking out in a grocery store and the person in front of me is paying in pennies, if anger is running the show, I might think that person is being a jerk. They're being inconsiderate. I'm having all of these negative thoughts and attributing them malice. Like have you ever heard of Hanlon's razor?
I'm not.
Okay. Hanlon's razor is never attribute to malice, which can be best explained by stupidity.
Okay.
And so when we are in the midst of anger, what do? We're attributing malice to another person that might not necessarily have malice. They may be just stuck in their own head and in their own world and coming at it from not thinking about how their actions affect other people. So, yeah. I mean, that really gets it.
Right. And so in the case of fear, anxiety, if they're running the show, I might think I'm going to be late and I'm going to end up getting fired. So that might be a example of like if our brain is thinking that, then we're making almost like it's that automatic negative thought that's running the emotion.
Yeah, same incident, thinking of it from two different ways. One of them is blaming the other person, and the other one is being afraid of the consequences of the situation.
Right.
So there's this technique in narrative therapy called externalization. And in that technique, we see people imagining these negative automatic thoughts as coming from another person or a cartoon character, a monster. Sometimes it's just an image of themselves when they're younger. It's whatever they choose to imagine it as, and not from themselves. So they see that emotion external from themselves.
Right.
And you're essentially at this point playing like the part of joy in the original Inside Out movie, and you're talking to these negative thoughts and helping dispel the ones that are irrational and don't serve you or help in your best interests.
Right. So I think one of the biggest lessons that Joy learns in the first movie is really important to this technique, and that's that she couldn't just ignore the other emotions when she didn't like what she said. There was just no way to ignore them. She had to pay attention to them. She had to learn the importance of these emotions. She had to pay attention to them and give them space and respect without letting them dominate.
Right. And you see her try to ignore sadness several times. And what does sadness do? Sadness goes off in the corner and kind of sulked.
Right.
And Joy needed her to do stuff. And every time she would need her to do stuff, she's trying to talk to her, she's trying to negotiate with her. And then she keeps finding sadness like face down in the floor because she wasn't giving sadness space to say what sadness needed to say. And that's what happens really when we ignore our emotions.
Right. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be anxious. I think what's important to listen to, it's important to listen to those feelings, but it's also important not to let them control us to the point where it's making our lives miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
It's very important.
And that's why the techniques work, because we get out of those automatic thoughts and look at the situation from a new point of view. But we do it in a way that kind of honors that part of us that's feeling afraid or sad or angry. And the different emotions in the movie are treated as friends. And so we're doing that. We're treating these emotions as friends. We're recognizing their concerns. We're hearing them out. We're feeling our feelings. And then we're addressing them, understanding why they feel that way, treating ourselves with kindness and not judging ourselves. But at the same time, we're also addressing those thoughts that don't serve us or that get us stuck in those negative loops. So, for an example, if I'm having the thought of everybody hates me, then treating that with kindness would be like, okay, it sounds like you're feeling really frustrated right now. You're feeling like everybody hates you. Is that really realistic? Does everybody really hate you? Well, no, so-and-so doesn't, really, doesn't seem to hate me. Well, can you tell me why? And then you're coming at that from Joy's perspective, which is going to change our mood.
Right, exactly. So let's think for a minute about what happens when we are afraid and when we try to just ignore the feelings. If it's the same when we try to ignore someone when we're feeling afraid or angry, they get louder and more insistent. So that voice in our head just keeps getting louder and louder. Same things happen when we try to ignore the thoughts rather than addressing the feeling. I think it's important that, instead of ignoring things, shoving them down, stuffing them, they're just going to come out some way. They're going to
Yes.
come out as another emotion in some sense or some form of fashion. So if we stop feeling the feeling and ignore it, it's going to come out some way, whether it comes out in an emotion or whether it comes out in a physical health issue, but it's going to come out.
Yeah, it absolutely
Yeah.
will come out.
And we've talked about this before. The body keeps the score.
Yes.
And so, Bessel van der Kolk has talked about that in many realms in the psychology world. And so, being attentive to what our body is feeling, feeling those emotions and being able to be present with that, I think is very important.
Well, and I do a lot of work with my clients about recognizing emotions in the body, and then being able to because if we've ignored our emotions for such a long time, sometimes we don't really know what we're feeling. We're just like, I don't know what emotion I'm feeling. So then when we start connecting with our body and recognizing what emotions feel like, because emotions don't feel in our head, they feel through our body. When you feel anger, you feel there's a whole category of different feelings that you can feel, and it varies from person to person and situation to situation, that are cues of anger, and those are based on those chemical reactions that happen in the brain, and those chemicals being sent through the body that cause a physical reaction within the body in response to that emotion.
Right.
So I might feel restless. What's that? That's all the endorphins running through and adrenaline running through my muscles that are making me feel restless. That could be a sign of anger. It could be a sign of anxiety. That's that fight or flight kicking in. I could feel tightness in my chest. That could be because my blood pressure has been raised because I'm anxious or I'm angry. It could be my hands want to tighten up and my muscles get tight. And that's my body preparing for action. That's part of that fight or flight. These are all physical things that happen to us when we feel emotions.
Right, exactly. One of the things I do in my Stop Anxiety group is early on in the semester we do what's called mindful battleship. And so within that group, what we do is I have them pair up, and they have a grid, and they have their battleships on the grid, and each one of them, they have to decide areas in their body where they're feeling stress or they're holding tension. And they write down on their sheet where they are. And so then they have to they have to observe their body, and they have to recognize, where am I holding tension? So it might be my forehead, it might be my toes, it might be my shoulders, it might be my stomach, it might be my back or my neck. And so then they set, side by side, or, forward facing each other. And they have to look at each other and observe the other person and decide where the other person is holding tension or stress, or really being, mindfully aware of what's happening with the other person. So it's really paying attention to what's happening. And it's really interesting because some people can be observant of other people and recognize those things. And if they can recognize that, they can sync their battleships. And so,
That's really cool.
when we become body aware, but within that, when we become body aware of where we're holding, it's not only those physical pieces of tension, let me use my words right, tension. When we recognize that, there's emotions that get attached to that. So if we can say, I'm holding a lot of anger inside of me, that anger will manifest itself somewhere.
Yeah.
And so if there's a lot of stress, so if you're dealing with a lot of anxiety, that anxiety is being held somewhere in your body. If you have a lot of joy gets held in your body. If you have a lot of fear gets held somewhere in your body.
Yep.
And so this mindful battleship just brings attention. So it's a great activity.
It sounds awesome.
It's fun. You can do it with young kids. You can do it with middle school kids. You can do it with teenagers. You can do it with college-age students, which is why I do it here. I love it. You can do it with adults. You can do it in your family. If you want to do it at Thanksgiving, Christmas time, get your family together, get friends, get your sorority or your fraternity together, do this so you can become body aware. It's a team building activity too, so you can understand the perspective of people around you, because it also helps you recognize when maybe somebody is having a crisis too. You can recognize, oh, that person really has a lot of furrowed brows lately, or maybe they're carrying a lot of tension in their shoulders. Maybe it's okay to say, hey, are you doing okay today? I noticed something's different about you.
Yeah. I mean, and that can make a world of difference,
It
just
can.
knowing somebody cares.
Yeah.
But it's also important to recognize it within ourselves too, because so often when we're just trying to get through day-to-day stressors and, you know, get our homework done and get to back and forth to work and do all the things we need to do, we have a tendency to tune out the emotions that we feel, and then we still feel them, they still cause a physical reaction, but then we start ignoring the physical reaction. And when we start becoming body aware, we're giving a voice to those emotions, that little control panel, we're giving it a voice so that we can hear it. And so then now we're not dealing with constant heartburn because we're feeling stressed. We're not dealing with constant neck pain because we've been battling anxiety. And that's another stressor that's off us. It gives us an ability to communicate with those voices. And that's really what this looks like, and what externalization is about. It's about recognizing and listening to your emotions and addressing them rather than just ignoring them. And it looks basically like a conversation. We're just simply talking to, you know, our emotions like we would a friend. And I get that you're feeling afraid. I get that you're feeling angry. And then we reflect what their fear is. The chances of that happening are slim, or yes, maybe that is going to happen. How are we gonna deal with that? And speaking in a calm manner, and it helps us kind of dispel that emotion and be able to feel better and not just sit with it.
Right. You know, I guess we have to ask ourselves, would we go up to a friend and say, "You look terrible today. You're an awful person. You know what? I think you're just going to be a failure. I wish you would just quit. I don't like you."
Yeah, nobody likes you.
Would
Nobody.
would we do that to our friends?
Never.
So let's think about that. If we don't do that to our friends, why do we do this to ourselves?
Right. And we do.
We do.
Talk to ourselves in our head in a way that we would never talk to another human being on the planet. Like we decide that we're stupid and nobody likes us and we don't deserve this and we don't. We do.
Yeah. And that's where you come back to that being aware of what those internalized conversations are, recognizing where are the emotions. And I love this technique, like you said, Amber. It's externalization, being able to step back, becoming body aware, becoming emotionally aware of where we are. And it's just doing a check-in with yourself, you know, and that's part of taking control of who you are, not allowing the automatic negative thoughts to control you. So just like Riley, you know, in this situation, you know, Joy, who doesn't want Joy to be in control? But in the movie, I think one of the things that I learned, and we learn more often, is joy can't exist without sadness.
Yes, and that was hugely important. And the other piece of that was wonderful was showing that it's not always just one emotion that has control of a situation.
Right.
She really learned that most of the time it's multiple emotions co-occurring at the same time.
Right.
And that was vitally important.
It is vitally important. So don't feel that you have to be happy all the time. Don't feel that life is always going to be sad. I think this is something I want every student to hear today. If you're sad today, know that tomorrow can come, sunshine can come tomorrow. It's just around the corner. And so if you're hearing this little head in your voice today that says things are never going to get better, just know that that's a thought that is only a thought. Thoughts change, emotions change. Nothing is permanent.
No. And if you're struggling with something like that, we have counseling. You can come up and talk to us. We can work through this technique or similar techniques. Tracy and I were talking before the show about how this technique, the basis of this technique is called different things in a variety of different modalities. And you can talk to somebody and say, hey, I want to try to learn this technique, and we can walk you through it, or we can use any of a dozen other techniques. But you don't have to live with one emotion running the show all the time to the point of your detriment.
Right. Yeah. If anxiety is running you right now, pick up the phone, call 988, there's going to be a mental health professional there at the other end of that line to listen to you. If you can't talk, text. There's so many of us today who text because we can't. We don't have the verbal words, but we can text someone. So they have texting available, they have talking, they have video chat. They're available 24/7. So if you need to start there, start there. And then you can go on our website and you can schedule a screening. And you can see all of our schedules and schedule when it's available for you. Whatever works in your schedule. You'll see our schedules. We're there Monday through Friday from 8 to 4:30. And we want to work with you. Don't think that your situation is that it doesn't matter, that it's not important. You are important. Every one of you listening to this podcast, every student on this campus is important. And if you're not a student at Missouri S&T and you need assistance, go to psychologytoday.com. There are therapists all over this world who can meet your needs. There are agencies, counseling centers, outpatient clinics that are here to meet your needs. If you're in Rolla and you have crisis and you need to seek an urgent care center, there's the critical access point here in Rolla, as well as the emergency care center at Phelps Health. There's services available to you. So please just reach out for help. But call us. We're here. We're in 204 Norwood Hall.
Yep. We can absolutely help. So thank you for joining us today, minors. This has been a little bit of a shorter episode.
That's okay.
But give yourself some space.
Absolutely.
Be kind to yourself. And we will see you next week.
Take care. If you like this podcast, please remember to like and subscribe. To schedule an appointment or to reach out to us about future topics you would like to see, please email us at wellbeing@mst.edu. You can also reach us by phone at 573-341-4211. We are located at 204 Norwood Hall.
I accept the challenge.
Get out there and do your best!
Hey, go easy on yourself. Come on now.
Now you're talking!
For more mental health and well-being content, please follow us on Facebook at Missouri S&T Wellbeing and on Instagram at S&T Wellbeing.
But most importantly,
never give up.